I've been training for 2 decades, not just going to the gym, exercising, working on my fitness and health, but spending 5 days per week the last 20 years training every workout, looking to build as much muscle mass as humanly possible. As you probably guessed, over that time, I've experimented with a lot of ideas, and a lot of it was trial and error. And all the training ideas that I talk about on this channel, and all the muscle building methods that are in some of my programs, and the ones that I use with clients I work with directly, they're all a result of those 20 years of trial and error. With that said, that means that there's a good mix of up-to-date bodybuilding science, old school bodybuilding training methods, and in fact, more recently, a lot of the things that I've been saying, I've heard a lot of people refer to more as bro science. So in this video, we're going to break down the difference between bodybuilding literature and bro science, or what the guy in the gym tells you without any data to back it up. And we're also going to talk about why both of these ideas have their place in bodybuilding and why both might have limitations. Yes, including science. First, let's start with the idea of bodybuilding science. I've been in the gym training since 2003. Back then, bodybuilding science, it was extremely limited. You couldn't just randomly Google to pull up the latest meta-analysis to learn how many sets you should be doing in the gym to build the most muscle. You had to start with something and then figure it out as you go. And the more experimenting you did, the more time and effort you put in, the more hours you racked up, the better that you got at training and programming through more trial and error. And if you actually applied what you learned during those hours, you actually got better results. Now, more recently over the years, guys take to science for those answers, which is great. We should always be learning. And the great thing about science is it does give us a guideline. For example, 10 to 20 working sets per week seems to be agreed upon by most of the science-based community as the right amount of volume to build the most muscle mass possible. If guys know nothing else and they just blindly apply that 10 to 20 sets weekly, they should get decent results. But many people will forever blindly apply these bodybuilding principles because, well, science. And what happens to a lot of these guys is they just never experiment beyond these guidelines. And ultimately, that becomes a limitation to them. What they don't realize is that the conclusion of this study was the result of 6 weeks, 12 weeks, maybe 3 to 6 months. And the result is the data suggested that whatever the number of sets were, the reps, the load, the training intensity, whatever variable that they were studying, as a result of that study, that is in fact the optimal way to train. But what many people end up misunderstanding is that might have been the optimal way to train inside a controlled 6 to 12 weeks of time. But the question you need to ask is that the most optimal way to train over a 20-year career? If you looked at the training method that they used during that study and applied it over an entire career of training, maybe you compared it to a more traditional approach to training. Would the one in the study still be the optimal approach long term? And the answer is, we don't know. I'm not aware of any 20-year long training studies done. So that's one thing that you just need to consider when blindly following a new training study that comes out. Now, compare that way of thinking to, let's say, someone who's been training for 20 years. That's almost like conducting a study on themselves. There's plenty of guys who've been bodybuilding even longer than that. And all these guys have 20, 30, or even 40 years of experience to go off of. But the conclusions that they draw from that time and that effort are all of a sudden labeled as bro science. The truth is evidence. You have scientific evidence, and then you have anecdotal evidence. And in most cases, and in bodybuilding specifically, scientific studies, they're often limited to short training periods, something like 6 to 12 weeks. And anecdotal evidence usually can be pulled from more long-term experience. Now, I don't pick and choose, and I don't say that one is better than the other. And I'm definitely not saying that bro science is the only thing that matters and that bodybuilding science is useless. But what I am saying is that if you do this long enough, you will find that what's been shown to be optimal in a 6 to 12 week study, maybe for beginners or even intermediates, might not always reflect the same way in the real world, especially when considering we're talking about training for 5, 10, or 20 years. And it especially might not apply to the same cases when we're talking about intermediate or advanced lifters. And after finding this out with my own physique after years of training, the feedback and the results that I've seen working with clients for over 15 years, it taught me that there's absolutely a time and place for science-based programming in any training routine, and that science should be the base of anything that you do. But long term, you might have to use strategies and ideas that could possibly go against the grain of bodybuilding science. Some of these ideas shouldn't be ignored, and some of them potentially can produce better results, again, when we're talking about long term. They could possibly keep you healthier in the long run, and as a result, get you more results. A great example, a new study might come out that says training legs 3 times per week might be better than training 2 times per week, maybe in a 12-week study. But in the real world, we might see that guys who train legs 3 times per week for more than 6 months out of the year, their injury rate might be higher. So if we take someone who's not looking to just get the best results out of 6 weeks of training and then move on to something else, we're probably going to have to use a different approach for someone who's looking to get bigger and stronger year after year. If another study shows that 6 days per week training is better than 3 days per week training, maybe in a 3-month study, we can try training 6 days per week. But if we find that guys doing this long term need more breaks and it can be just exhaustive for them for long periods of time, anecdotally, we might find that 5 days per week is better for training for the long run. You can call all of this bro science. I'll just call it anecdotal evidence. And any great program should in fact be a mixture of both, because that means the program is built on what actually works and years of wisdom and experience. That's why I always refer back to the basics, the tried and true methods, the ones that worked back then and still work now. And if you want to check those out, you can find all of my old school mass game programs down below. And as always, if you guys want to see more of the best original bodybuilding content just like this, make sure to hit subscribe.